fighters, and welcome to another episode of Reptile Fight Club. This is Justin Julander, your host, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Rob Stone. How's it going?
Oh, it's going pretty well. We got our first substantial snow of the season this week.
Okay. Yeah.
So that was exciting. I don't know if you got it up there as well.
We did get some. Yeah. It stuck. It was on the ground for a bit, a couple inches on Sunday, but
okay.
I think it's mostly gone now.
Okay. Yeah, I think we had that one too. And then this one was Wednesday night. I think we probably, it was actually Wednesday. No, I should say started late Tuesday night into early Wednesday morning, went through most of the day Wednesday. So we probably got, 4 or 5 inches.
Okay. Maybe it's headed this direction. I don't know.
Right?
we didn't get any, at least nothing substantial during the week, but yeah, 'tis the season, huh?
It begins.
Yeah. I always maintain if it's going to be cold, it might as well snow. Give the skiers a reason to be happy. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So, it is getting colder. That's the downside. So, yeah, I guess dreams of Australia or warmer times for herping are running through my mind for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Lows in the mid-teens have you thinking of spring with the great fondness.
Yeah. And I've had this cold. I'm pretty much over it, but my voice still sounds a little froggy here and there. So, and I played water polo today, so that didn't help. Got beat up on and a little tired after that, but so my voice may reflect that a little as well. But
fair enough. How did the tournament go?
It was good. The other teams were more cohesive as a team. We had a number of players that had never played before, so it was a little imbalanced that way. So we ended up losing to all the other teams. We should have won one of the games that we just, I don't know, we didn't get it together. We had another guy that was supposed to be there Friday night, but he didn't end up showing up till Saturday. And so, we fared a little worse than we thought we might with kind of the team building we did. So we had invited people from other areas to come play on our team. And it's kind of a double-edged sword because we've got these guys that are coming every week and a couple of them had never played before, but they've come to practice every day, sure. Every time we have practice. And then, I feel bad not having them play. And there's some, they're in there for 5 minutes and the person that they're guarding is scoring and, so it's really kind of a hard thing, but, we let them play. And so we lost the games, but I think it's more important to let them enjoy the tournament as well.
Okay.
But it was fun. I was still a little under the weather, so I wasn't, to full capacity. So I had to sub out pretty quickly, but I think there were a lot of eager people willing to get in there. I think there were 3 bloody noses on our team from aggressive people on the other teams. Yeah. One was a blatant just punch in the face under the water because he stole the ball from him or something. So yeah, and they had to get out and go get it taken care of from the lifeguard and stuff like that.
Oh my gosh.
It's a rough sport, but
rough and tumble.
Yeah,
there you go.
Yeah.
Okay.
BYU came with, I think they won the whole tournament. They were just unbeatable. They were really a good team. On the plus side, the Masters team, all these guys are probably over 50 or at least 40, and they took second. I can't remember if they beat the BYU at the last game. I went home early, so I didn't watch the last game, but BYU had a pretty stacked team. I don't know what it is. I guess a bunch of Southern California guys got into BYU that know how to play water polo pretty well. So
there you go. Okay.
It was fun.
Cool.
Yeah. So for all you water polo fans out there, I'm sorry we're going to change the subject now and get on to other things.
Just wanted to give the update, right?
Yeah. No, it's fun.
You mentioned you were headed out, so give you a little bit of time to shine.
So. Right. It was a good time. So it's always fun to. I mean, that's the whole reason I'm enjoying playing is like you don't get pickup water polo games in northern Utah. I mean, maybe in Salt Lake or, something like that. They do have a Masters League in Ogden that gets together fairly regularly. So, but you still have to drive an hour or more to get down to one of those. So in my neck of the woods, that's about as good as I get as practice with the club team at the university. So,
okay.
Yeah. One of those neglected sports in Utah, but it's a big deal in other places. So hopefully it keeps increasing and getting bigger in Utah. That's where we are now. I remember a few tournaments we did in Colorado. There was they had one pool that wasn't chlorinated. It was like reverse osmosis or something, one of those kind of things. And so it was like no chlorine. Your eyes felt great after the game. Yeah. Fun stuff.
Very cool.
How's everything going for you?
Yeah, just busy. Busy time of year with, various things across the board. Not the animals for the,
right.
As we've talked about, all my stuff goes in the spring, but yeah, just work stuff. And obviously when we start getting the weather, that throws things a little bit discombobulated, but yeah, all good.
Right. Nice.
But you with stuff that's being paired now, how's that going?
Pretty well. It seems like things are moving in the right direction for a number. I've seen a number of locks and, so I don't know. I never really count my eggs until they're coiled around.
Until they're chickens.
Yeah. I really want to figure out the blackhead incubation. So I need to really, I've got some good advice from Jordan and so I just need to make that happen, try to figure it out and get a better hatch rate out of those this year. That would be awesome. The ones I have, I'm still limping. The one hatchling from 2025, she is still not eating on her own. And so I'm assist feeding right now, but I just got to get to that point where she realizes, oh, this is food and goes for it. So, but yeah, the ones that I hatched out 2 years prior with the smaller eyes, I've kept that pair I can't sell them, but they're looking phenomenal. Like the black and white on those things is incredible. So yeah, that's really cool. Yeah. And speaking of the blackheads, right, has me thinking about Keith. He had made mention of Kate. It was Casey, right? Had reached out to him with some advice around egg incubation because he's been struggling. I think he has some Swiss animals, man. They sure look cool. Yeah.
But he hasn't. Maybe he's hatched some, but not the success he's looking for. But thinking about him really right because tomorrow he's undergoing his treatment, and we're thinking about you, Keith.
Yeah, best of luck with everything. Yeah, hopefully everything goes smoothly, and
I'm sure it will. He'll be on the mend, and just gotta remotivate him. I told him he could take a lion for a couple days, and then he's got to get back to training for the death marches. So death marches in Australia. So
yeah. It's fun to herp with old Keith. So yep. Wish you well, man. So I've got a new project that I'm hopeful for to get some offspring from. Things look like they're moving in the right direction there too. So hopefully I'll be able to have some good news on that front, as things progress. And so yeah, it should be a fun year at least. But yeah, it's just business as usual, I suppose. Yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
Things are going better at work, so that puts a little less pressure on selling snakes, or I was worried about some work things there for a bit, but things are moving in a better direction that way. So that's good. And I got a new project, a writing project. So I don't know. It's really early in the process. We'll see how it goes and see. It'll be probably a long while before I really mention anything more, but a little teaser, I guess. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. But Yeah, life's good. Can't complain. Yeah.
All right. Well, you saw a presentation, a talk today or this week?
Yeah, it was today. So we at the university, my department, we have invited scientists that come and give talks on their area of expertise, and we so our department does this seminar series with the vet school. And so the vet school has been bringing in some interesting folks, and one of the vet school personnel brought in let's see, I can't remember her name. I guess I should have had that prepared, but she was from somewhere in the southeast, I believe Georgia. Currently, I'll have to look up the information at some point, but she talked about snake fungal disease as part of her research project for her PhD, and then she's continued doing some of that work with snake populations in the southeast. I guess each state has their own kind of fish and wildlife or some form of fish and wildlife services statewide. And then there's also regional fish and wildlife groups that kind of oversee larger projects. And so this was one of those types, and she runs one of the facilities that's kind of a regional center for fish and wildlife studies. So one of her areas is continues to be snake fungal disease. So it just got me thinking about, we had an outing in New Jersey where we found an eastern milk snake that appeared to have snake fungal disease, and it seems to be fairly prevalent in the United States. There was some discussion on which species may or may not be more susceptible, and I guess some were maybe species of concern, including eastern indigo snakes. So that was kind of a big deal. I guess they've done some studies with the Oriane Society to look at snake fungal disease prevalence in eastern indigos. So I guess where you have a species of concern, it becomes even more concerning when they get some kind of fungal disease. And then, hearing about chytrid and all the issues with that when we had Dr. Mendelson on the program. Fortunately, snake fungal disease doesn't seem to be the lethal killer that chytrid is for amphibians. So that's on the plus side. That's kind of a nice thing, but it can be pretty debilitating. Lots of lesions and ulcerations, or what did she call them? I think just, exposure of the muscle and things like that. Loss of the skin was pretty terrible, in some of the specimens. So, I got to thinking it might be an interesting topic while it's fresh in my mind to discuss that on the podcast. We could talk about kind of ethical herping with snake fungal disease in mind, or collection of, reptiles from the wild that may bring snake fungal disease into your collection. Is it a big deal? Should we worry about it? Or since it's not as bad as chytrid, do we it's out there in the environment anyway, so is it a big deal or not? So at least we can kind of discuss the implications of snake fungal disease in regards to field herping, as well as in our captive population. So that's kind of what spurred that on. An interesting topic, I hope, for people out there. And if not, maybe you can learn something new, and maybe it will be an important topic for you in the future. So thought it was worthwhile. Absolutely.
No, I thought it was super interesting. Certainly, I don't know that we'll have an intense fight to suit Dom and crew who want to see bludgeoning from both sides.
Right.
Obviously, in jest. But I think there are a lot of considerations combined, that then with contravailing practicalities, right?
Right,
so
right.
Jump into it in terms of talking through it.
And I think too, a lot of these issues, like for example, the trade in salamanders after they detected the B-sal. Yeah. And fungal diseases have increased, with increasing global temperatures and things like that. These things have been a huge issue, especially in amphibian conservation. And when you think about the United States as one of the, biodiverse hotspots for salamanders, especially, it definitely gives you pause in regard to that. But at the same time, I think you can have overreactions and overreaching. And so, I don't want to make this so I guess that's kind of the idea of the two sides of the coin here, is that we can have kind of an overreactive, legislative or strict, prohibitions on things. And I, just kind of thinking through that aspect of it too, in regards to the theme of the podcast. So that's kind of the fight, I guess, that I came up with in that regard. Although it is a bit lopsided. I mean, nobody's going to be like, yeah, don't worry about it at all. So that's not necessarily the issue here, but I do want to have kind of a devil's advocate when it comes to the other side of the coin, to not overreact or not be too, strict or stringent or something like that, or what could possibly happen on that side of the coin. So
yeah,
with that, we will flip said coin and see what side we get, I guess. So go ahead and call it.
All right. I will say tails.
Tails. Well, you got your tails today.
There you go.
All right. Had to happen at some point. You've kind of had a dry streak of coin toss wins, but so yeah. How would you like to approach this, I guess, or what side?
Well, that being said, I will celebrate my first victory in 5 or 6 tosses by saying, you should choose what you like. You just went to the presentation today. This is your topic. I'm happy to try and expound on the other side, and let's go from there. So whatever jumped to you from as you were going through it.
I'll take that kind of don't overreact side, or, it's kind of the reasonable approach to this rather than So if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I will check you and we can get it going.
That sounds good. So with these fungal diseases, I guess the bad news is that once they get in the environment, they seem to persist. It's similar to, a lot of, I guess, wildlife diseases out there where there's just a risk that they're going to get these. Now, some issues have arisen because of research into these areas, like chytrid was spread around by researchers, not rinsing their boots or not washing their boots and going into areas that didn't have chytrid and introducing it that way. And they figured that the original chytrid came into or spread across the world with the frogs, the water frogs, what are those? African clod frogs.
Clod frogs. Xenopus. Yeah.
Xenopus. Yeah. That were used in pregnancy tests, interestingly enough. I think a woman peed on a frog, and if it croaked, then she was pregnant. Frog, but something like that. No. But there were tests that used African clod frogs, and so they were shipped around the world. And I remember in high school, I actually ordered some clod frogs from one of the Carolina Biological Supply Company, and so that was they were fairly easy to obtain, and you could get them. And I think a lot of people that did get those, or once their project was done, they just throw them out in the river out back or something. It was the 80s, just things were willy-nilly, you could do just about anything. So that's how they figured that this chytrid fungus spread around the world, basically, and was introduced into many different countries, many different ecosystems, and is now a part of the ecosystem, unfortunately, and prevents the re-release or the release of different frog species back into the environment. So they have arcs, set up for chytrid, but what do you do when you can't get rid of it out of the environment? That's kind of the problem.
It's persistent in the environment. Yeah. Couple things there. I also had one. I had an albino cloud frog that got quite large. It was a great pet for a long time. Although
they're cool animals. They're really interesting. Yeah,
absolutely.
I loved watching them eat worms. Like they just like gobble it, like just shoving it into their mouth. Yeah. So
Front feet.
fun to watch. Yeah.
And, as you say, kind of in the same way, my understanding of Ophidiomyces is that it's persistent in the environment. So it's actually treatable in animals in captive settings with a specific antifungal drug. There's been success treating it. But as an organism that can survive in soil conditions, it's really persistent in those environments, as you say. So it's not practicable to be like treating a population and seeing good viability, seeing it be, no longer an issue for a given population.
Right. There was some indication that I remember seeing like treatment of like the yellow-legged mountain frogs in California, or red-legged frogs. I can't remember the specific frog species, but they were one of those vulnerable
lakes.
Yeah. And they were being hammered by chytrid and just decimating their population. And so scientists found that if you dip them in an antifungal dye solution, it's like something blue, that they would resolve and the fungus would be eliminated, and that they were actually resilient to reinfection. They could go back into the environment and they wouldn't get chytrid again. Now, I asked that question, if you treat the snakes with snake fungal disease, are you able to, can they get it again? And the answer was, they think, yes, they will be able to. And they didn't have, I guess she said that snakes don't have a very good adaptive immune response. So they're not mounting antibodies and having memory T cells and things like that to prevent reinfection. So I don't know, it's not a lot is known, so it's hard to say if they're getting a different fungus. There are actually a couple different fungal diseases of snakes that present very similarly with, lesions and scale, issues. But so I guess from that perspective, if it's not going to be removed from the wild, and you've got, a chance that the animal will be re-exposed, even if you bring it into captivity and treat it. And she said that the treatment options are not great. So like the treatments take months, so you've got to pull a snake in from the wild, and they were doing nebulization of antifungal. So they would breathe it in and also get it topically, would kind of go across the scales. And that was the treatment. And, but it took weeks. And then also they could just get reinfected, or it didn't cure it completely. So I guess from that aspect, it's like, what do you do? It doesn't seem to be, I guess there are some species that are more susceptible, just like with chytrid, like your bullfrogs don't seem to be very susceptible to chytrid, whereas the red-legged mountain frogs were highly susceptible, and a lot of the tropical frogs were highly susceptible, and their populations are just decimated, and
I was wondering, even going back to that conversation we alluded to a little bit earlier here, is talking about temperature, right? Is some of that and thinking of snake fungal disease I think the context that maybe I was first exposed to was timber rattlesnakes in the Northeast, and the idea of essentially that the conditions in their hibernation conditions, particularly with the overexpansion due to fire mismanagement of sort of woody understories that are shading out the basking platforms that the snakes require, particularly in, fall and into the spring to warm up, because it's really mostly, in terms of their condition, the capacity to get off a clean shed and at least draw back a lot of the superficial impact of their of the load that they're carrying, right? That's a big part of it, is the capacity to just sort of knock it back by shedding. And obviously the biological process of shedding requires the ability to, achieve higher temperatures and things. And there's actually this interaction of factors with sort of the ecology of where they're hibernating that also is interacting with SFD and potentially making it have a more dramatic impact than it would in an area, out here in the West. We probably see less of that because they have a greater ability to access the sun and warm up and expedite a shed process, or not be sitting in a lingering process for as long. And obviously humidity also can have, stagnant humidity can have a deleterious effect on snake skin. Right. So as you highlighted, right, not only are there multiple things there are multiple things that can cause kind of a similar appearance of those lesions and things. And sometimes that could just be being exposed to excessive stagnant humidity for too long, right? Particularly at cold temperatures. So,
right. Yeah, and there was a map that she showed where snake fungal disease had been reported, and I think there wasn't. Maybe the U.S. map was snake fungal disease in the wild, and Utah and Colorado had absent. They haven't had snake fungal disease reported. So I think there's a lot to what you're saying, and yeah, I mean, depending on where you live, it may be more of a problem, and also by species. There was made mention of some Nerodia in the water snakes in Florida and things that were tended to be more wet and water loving, and they tended to have more severe outcomes when infected with the snake fungal disease. So yeah, that's and so I guess kind of my original point there is that if it's in the environment and they're going to get exposed, I guess, it's probably a courtesy to maybe try to prevent spread, especially if you're handling a snake that has snake fungal disease, or
looks like it might.
Right. Or potentially has snake fungal disease. And that's the other thing, is you can't always tell,
there are false positives and false negatives.
Right. Her answer, because I asked that question, I said, how do you prevent spread? If I'm out there, photographing snakes and obviously we're not handling timber rattlers. So that's one thing where you just kind of get them as they go. But the other thing, like with that Eastern milk snake. Yeah. We did, handle it to some extent, posed it for some photos before putting it back under the rock we found it under. And we did what we could. We had some disinfectant wipes and some hand sanitizer. And so, and that was kind of the answer. If you do handle, wear gloves and replace your gloves between snakes. And I mean, I guess you could go herping with gloves on, that wouldn't be too great. And so and also she mentioned that bleach was an important disinfectant. So that'll knock it out pretty quick. So I thought, if you had some Clorox wipes or something, you could, wipe your hands if you're, or if you're handling,
the bucket.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, wiping it out and stuff. So that was kind of the answer. But, even then, you're not curing the snake fungal disease on the snake that you saw. And they don't really have a great grasp on how it's transmitted. So you may not even be transmitting it between snakes, even if you're not washing your hands or cleaning your hands between handling snakes. So, I think I wonder if there could be a measurable impact, due to herpers or not. And I would probably suspect that it's probably a very minor component, because the number of snakes out there, the ones that are infected, how much are they being handled? And I would think if you found a snake that was severely affected by snake fungal disease, you're probably not going to necessarily want to pick it up or handle it anyway. So, or pose it for pictures and things like that. I guess the caveat there was the Eastern milk was our lifer. Eastern milk.
And
so
I would say, in my recollection of it anyway, it was we didn't spot it and identify it as such at a distance. So in terms of saying, oh, this is a snake with SFD, it was kind of in the process of taking pictures of it and things that we said, this one, maybe there's issues here.
Right. And it was fairly minor if it was infected. I mean, you could see kind of a
couple patches. Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess that's part of the diagnosis of that, is that, mainly you've got to get a swab and run some PCR and look for DNA from that snake and see if it's got snake fungal infection. And you can get false negatives, false positives, things like that as well. And also, just because it doesn't have signs or scale issues, it can still have snake fungal disease. So, and the Eastern milk was in shed. It was, it had the blue eyes. And so
I suspect if we had seen it a week later, it would have been shed out, would have looked totally fine. And we would have been none the wiser if indeed it did have it.
Yeah, but it could still be, covered with snake fungal. Yeah, exactly. So that's are you finding it right after a shed or, right before a shed? It depends on a lot of things there, or how severely it's affected already, and, what time of year it got infected, or those kind of things all kind of play into that. So I guess there's no guarantee that even if you find a very healthy looking snake with no obvious signs of snake fungal disease, that you're not transmitting that to other snakes that you may handle in the field. So it's probably, just good practice to clean your hands between handling animals in the wild, regardless of whether there's a snake fungal disease to pass along. But at the same time, it's like, I really don't think that field herpers are going to play a very large role to spread the disease, because it's already spreading without our help.
Absolutely. And I would say only half in jest that I think, the best preventive measure is relative to that Eastern milk snake was that we were herping in New Jersey, which meant I don't know that we even saw another snake the rest of the day.
Right.
So, yeah. I think that actually wound up being sort of the solution to that problem. I don't think we posed any risk whatsoever based on that. But no, I guess I would just posit, really it brings up the issue of, are you handling things unnecessarily, right? We're back into the conversation of, are you going for the grab, or are you trying to kind of, ideally, your, Kimberly rock monitor situation that we were just talking about a week or two ago, where you're going, okay, your enjoyment of that experience was really not going for the grab. We were able to see it engaging in its natural behaviors and things, and you still got photos you were happy with and those sorts of things, as opposed to the compulsion to grab and restrain every animal that you encounter, right? If, I guess would be, so it's yet another factor in the, hey, maybe consider don't grabbing everything that you see. Yeah. It's just as acknowledging all the points that you made relative to the probable lack of influence that this would have as a risk. It's still maybe just one more little tidbit on the side of don't just go grabbing everything. Hey, even our lifer northern water snake, looked awesome and all those things. But it's, if you see and touch one, then you don't necessarily have to see and touch those other ones there. Right. Even if they are at the same pond. So I have no doubt that they're exposed to exposed to it, should any of them have it anyway.
Yeah, that's a great point. And, I think, I agree fully. You don't need to be grabbing every snake. And I think that might come with, again, like if it's your first one, you might be a little more excited. You might want to check it out and look at it and handle it. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Picture or whatever it is.
Yeah. But at the same time, like if it's your 50th water snake, you don't need to jump on it and grab it and wrestle it. You don't need to Steve Irwin it necessarily. But so, yeah, that's a good point. And again, not handling is going to be a very effective way of not transmitting snake fungal disease from one snake to another. And, a den situation or a highly, high density population like the northern water snakes is a great example of that. We've got a den maybe 5 minutes from my house of garter snakes, and you can see both the valleys as well as the wandering garter snakes there. And it's pretty cool. They've fairly high numbers. And so, but I'm not a big fan of handling garter snakes anyway. They squeeze quite a bit. So, and similar to Nerodia, if you grab a Nerodia, you're probably going to get squeezed on and bit. So, more reasons maybe to leave them in situ and take pictures of them in their natural habitat as you found them, if possible,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I do recognize and acknowledge that like the glowered eye, right, is much more likely to not, once it didn't immediately skitter for shelter based on your presence, that it was more likely to hang out and engage than most snakes. I think the compulsion to grab is because their typical response is not to sort of appreciate that you're actually not a threat, right? And engage. I know Rob Christian does some super cool stuff in terms of watching, wild snakes and having them not be afraid of them and still engage in natural behavior. But for the most part,
tickle them on the chin. That's
just come up and tickle them. But for the most part, I think we go for the grab because of the idea that it's going to be gone. If we don't, it's going to be gone. Right. Yeah. Or we're road cruising. Right. And you don't exactly want to, you don't want it to leave it there under, even under that circumstance. So I suppose it does raise an issue of, should we be wiping down our hooks after, if heck, we're in, Southeast Arizona, Southwest New Mexico, and we're just moving Atrox and Mojaves off the road. Do we have, should we have the, container of wipes, as you say, and between each one, just wiping it down real quick just to try and help? Or is it such a negligible effect? And they're probably, to the extent Ophidiomyces is already in that area, that even if it's a half mile down the road, realistically, it's probably persistent in the environment. And it, is not making a negligible, or it is a negligible difference, right? So it doesn't justify the effort and the cost and all those things of those wipes,
Right. Yeah.
The trash of the wipes.
Exactly. Yeah. My problem too is remembering to do that, You get back in the car and you're high from just seeing a cool snake, and then, oh yeah, I got to wipe down my hook. Or I guess you could have a spray bottle with a 10% bleach solution, but then that's going to go bad after, or degrade the bottle or the spray mechanism, all sorts of fun with bleach solution. It's very caustic, and I guess that's why it's such a great disinfectant. But so, I guess maybe a squirt bottle or something.
As I was saying it, I was came to picture that same thing of, you got a 5-gallon bucket that you're dunking your hook into in the back seat every day. Just don't, when you slam on the brakes, hope that just means that Dustin gets covered in bleach solution or whatever.
Yeah, that would not be great. I guess you could clean your whole self really quickly that way. Being a water polo player, I really do enjoy the smell of bleach and chlorine, but I don't think I'd want it permeating my car like that. The ice bucket was bad, or the ice water container was bad enough.
If only it was bleach solution.
Right. My car might have been a different color on the interior after that. So is it really that big of a deal? And it's probably a good idea, like you said, just to make sure you're not part of the problem.
Right.
A lot of disease causing organisms have kind of like a threshold amount of, what you need to be exposed to before you're going to get sick from it. And it's hard to say, what you're actually getting off of the snake onto your hand or onto your hook or whatever. If the hook is a good fomite for transmission to other things is another good question. Does the Ophidiomyces stick to your hook, or does it just kind of slide off with the snake or whatever? So that's another thing that's kind of unknown. So we're kind of, it's always hard to make recommendations when the knowledge isn't there. Right. And we saw that with COVID, where, first they said, masks don't work. And then they said, well, we told you masks didn't work because they do work and we only want our healthcare people to have those. And it's like, that probably wasn't the best tactic to use to lie and then, then everybody, masks don't work because, people still get sick when they're wearing masks. They're not 100% effective, but they definitely reduce the exposure and things like that. Sure. So I don't know. There's a lot of different things. And are people wearing the mask properly? Are you using an old bleach solution to disinfect your hook, or do you have freshly prepared bleach solution, or did you dilute it too much or not enough, or things like that? It's interesting. Absolutely. That, like 100% ethanol. We use ethanol a lot because most of the viruses we work with in the lab, in the virology lab, are susceptible to ethanol, spraying. But there's also the question of contact time. Are you letting it sit long enough? Basically, if you're spraying your hands with ethanol, you're just waiting till it evaporates. But that's sometimes, you're not very patient. And so, we have backup mechanisms to prevent any, exiting of the lab of viruses. So some facilities that we work in are shower out. So you have to shower before you leave as you leave the facility. So same kind of idea. Even if you are disinfecting, are you doing it properly? Are you giving enough contact time to let that bleach solution work its magic? And I guess the nice thing about bleach solution is it has a fairly low contact time required, but it differs for different organisms. There's if you've heard of chronic wasting disease in elk and deer and animals, the bovine spongiform encephalitis, the BSE that we had in the cows, in some instances, a big scare over in England, and some of those transmissible encephalopathies that were these prion diseases. Prions are just misfolded proteins that are normally found in your body, but they somehow can convert other proteins to misfold in the same way. So, and they are very stable. Bleach solution doesn't do a thing to them, and there's no approved treatments or anything like that. So these are pretty scary things, but and they're out there. You can see some deer affected with chronic wasting disease here and there, and they're pretty prevalent in the West, and even in like mountain lions and other predators that are eating the deer. So kind of scary, but so it's hard to say if you're making an impact or if what you're doing is needless. I guess I brought that up in regards to disinfectants and using them properly. And some things just can't be disinfected very easily. And others, some things are very resistant. Others are pretty easy to treat. So I think fungus kind of falls in the middle there. They're pretty resilient organisms and can persist in the environment pretty well. So yeah, it's hard.
Yeah. It also calls to mind the idea of sort of reservoirs for disease, or
right.
You mentioned the COVID situation, the idea that now deer, right, in the East Coast in particular, have COVID and is now essentially just going to be persistent in the environment because we can have, it's consistently, now it's present, right? It's in that population, not causing disease, but it's present as a risk, and just means it will never go away, right? It'll continue to adapt. But
same with the bird flu, the highly pathogenic avian influenza strains. They've become endemic, because of migrating birds, and they're just very difficult to control what bird flies into your airspace or near your chicken farm, and they actually found that bird flu was being transmitted on the wheels of the trucks that were going from farm to farm. And so they would drive through a puddle that had bird flu or whatever, and then they would drive to another place and transmit that virus to the other place. So they've actually deregulated the virus to some extent, because it used to be a Southeast Asian problem, and only people who worked in bird farms, poultry farms, were at risk. But now it's pretty prevalent in the wild birds in North America. And it's also made the jump into cattle. And so now you have a bovine form of bird flu, and it's being transmitted from cow to cow, and it actually reduces milk production and things like that. So, now instead of having it be this highly regulated select agent virus, they've downregulated just to a normal BSL-3 agent. And so you don't have to go through all the hoops to work with it like you did before. So on the plus side, that means we're going to find, answers quicker and easier and less expensively than we will if they're a select agent. But, at the same time, it's like some of these select agents are select agent for a reason, and the highly regulated form is necessary to prevent bioterrorism and things like that. But I don't know. So interesting to see those kind of changes. Absolutely. And I think that may have some analogy to this, where like the more we know about it, the more we study it, that might be a better thing. And so instead of worrying about the minutia, let's worry about the big questions that we have and try to get answers to those. And I don't know, that's a hard thing, when you have a fungal disease of snakes, the interest of the people in funding that, sure. Probably not very high, but glad there is some research being done.
So some of this conversation calls back to, again, a recent conversation we had in the context, or your commentary in regards to Nick's comments on serpentovirus, right? And I guess I would just see how it engages in similar or different ways in terms of saying if we presume that it's existed for a long, is the question our knowledge and awareness of this as an entity within the world, right? Or is it genuinely spreading? Is it that we're now watching for it and paying attention? I don't know if you have any thoughts as to that.
Sorry, can you repeat that? I was looking up the name of the researcher. Sorry.
Yeah, fair enough. No, I was thinking like this calls back to the conversation that, or the position, right, that you wanted to clarify a couple weeks ago associated with Nick's comments around serpentovirus and whether something is sort of, is it our awareness of the thing, right, is causing us to see it more commonly, but it's actually existed for a long time, has been in these environments for a long time, or is it genuinely spreading before our eyes, right?
Right. Yeah, and I don't think that it was quite the problem that it is now, back, 10, 15, 20 years ago. But again, did we just not have as many observations of wild snakes or people noticing it, things like that, it's just a dirty, ugly snake, rather than and you get the same questions around, things like serpentovirus or autism, like is autism just easy to, or we have better diagnostic, identification of people with autism versus what we did in the 80s, or is it really increasing because of Tylenol?
Any of a variety of things.
Right.
Or is it just that, prior, 70 years ago, you were just considered to be spastic,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think that's a good question. And similar to the serpentovirus discussion, it can be absolutely drastic and horrible if you get the wrong strain and the wrong snake. But at the same time, just because you have a positive diagnosis of serpentovirus, or doesn't mean you should, euthanize your entire collection because one snake had a positive PCR for serpentovirus. I think in this regard, the snake fungal disease, just because you have it doesn't necessarily mean that snake's going to die. It could shed out and get rid of the snake fungal, or live with the snake fungal disease on its skin, for years or longer. So it's hard to say, how much we should panic about this stuff, or and in regards to collection of wild snakes, I mean, that could be a consideration. There is a chance that you could bring in an animal that would pass a fungal disease to the rest of your collection, and definitely underscores the need, another reason to quarantine your animals. Sure. And things like that. So think about that if you're out there collecting for the pet trade, that kind of thing.
Or buying wild collected animal, or even from someone who is, right?
Right.
We talk about purchasing from large dealers that have wild caught animals next to captive bred animals and those things, and what that quarantine looks like. But again, in a state where it's only given within specific conditions, right? The sort of lower temperature, higher humidity associated with hibernation that you're actually seeing the visual signs, is actually some risk that, right, it is, you do have snakes that are potentially spreading that condition, and there's no visualization to it.
Right.
And this captive red snake that was next to that wild caught snake, maybe. Again, you talk about loads and those sorts of things. Right. It's probably not a function of, just being in deli cups next to one another on a table. But if those represented being continually maintained next to or exposed to one another with the same tools and same cross contamination, basically.
Right. And we know a lot of times with those flippers or whatever, people who purchase large volumes of wild caught snakes, they oftentimes will house them communally, in a trough or something, have 50 individuals, crawling around each other, which would definitely increase their stress levels, their potential for spreading of diseases like that. And I think which a lot of times that's what gives that, wild caught pet trade kind of that bad reputation and well-deserved reputation of being risky and just not having long lifespans and things like that. So it's we don't want to further the spread or infect populations of captive animals that may not have that. Sometimes, it's maybe worth the risk, but just make sure you quarantine and keep an eye on stuff for at least several months, to prevent or avoid contamination or spread of a snake fungal disease.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But at the same time, we need to know more. We need to understand better how it spread, and in what context and things like that before we can make those calls. And I think, we're getting there with serpentoviruses. We understand, they can be pretty severe in some animals, and you can lose animals to serpentovirus despite Nick's claims that it's nothing to worry about. So, there definitely a risk of ophidiomyces as well, the snake fungal disease. And so we ought to take it seriously, but not, overblown until we have information or knowledge to let us be a little more worried about it or concerned about it. Now it looks like, at least this researcher that gave the talk, her name is Dr. Ellen Haynes, and she works as the Southeast Area Fish and Wildlife Regional Wildlife Health Coordinator at the University of Georgia. So That's who she is, Dr. Haynes. And she said that it's not really impacting snake populations as a whole. It's a problem and it's having some impact, but not a tragic or dramatic declines. Yeah. Or enough that it's worth, taking drastic measures to prevent this. So I guess taken together,
I would say.
Yeah. But there were some of the herpetology group there, and they made some comments to the contrary. Like there are some populations that are being hit harder, and a lot of animals are dying of snake fungal disease. So, and you could have different isolates that emerge that are more pathogenic and do cause more problems, similar to what we see with serpentoviruses. There are some serpentoviruses that are pretty benign and others that are very lethal. So, it's something to keep in mind.
Yeah, and to highlight, as I did previously, right, the idea of environmental conditions and sort of the nexus of those things. So there might actually be something about the conditions in which that population exists that also exacerbate the effect. Right?
Exactly.
So pulling those things, those seemingly inextricable things apart is always difficult, right? Teasing those apart. So
exactly, and that's, I guess, you don't want to make a big deal until there's a reason to, make a big deal, I guess. But 6 snakes are not great, so maybe we make some deal about it. And I guess people like Dr. Haynes are researching it and trying to find answers to or solutions to the problem. So that's good. But
yeah, absolutely. I think just being cognizant of it. And even in our situation with that lifer Easter milk snake, right, where when we did notice that, which was, as I say, not immediately, but pretty, as we were taking photos of it, I think it really highlighted kind of that we certainly did limit our interactions from there. And we did, as you say, kind of try and I cleaned the little photo bucket, the little photo lid and things in a way that I probably wouldn't normally. There was no obvious issues with it. And again, as you say, was it actually a potential fomite? Did it have a sufficient load to cause problems? I don't know. But I think in instances like that, minimizing contact and then trying to take the steps that are available to hand certainly seems reasonable. I don't know how you would really.
Yeah. So. And, it doesn't hurt to have a box of disinfectant wipes in your car or in your herp
kit.
We
can come up with plenty of uses or situations where we need those anyway. So.
Exactly. So I think it's, better safe than sorry, and maybe give you some peace of mind that at least you're not contributing further as best without doing a full swab and diagnostic test to find out. But, just doing your part is never a bad thing, I would think. But also don't break the bank or don't. I guess if you can't afford some Clorox wipes, you're probably not going to be able to afford to go out herping too often. So, but yeah. And, a lot of herping or interactions with reptiles, getting them off the road may be incidental. You might be on your way to work and, there's a snake crossing the road and you pull it off the road and put it in the bushes and it had snake fungal disease. But I mean, unless you're going to work at a zoo or, a reptile facility, you probably are not going to pass it on to other snakes that way. So, and she did mention one of the big ways to transmit snake fungal disease to other areas is actually through the soil. So if you're getting muddy boots and muddy shoes and not cleaning them between areas or, disinfecting your shoes, that could be a possibility, probably a more likely route of transmission of snake fungal disease to new areas. So something to keep in mind. And that's
an interesting idea. Right.
Yeah. And that was one of the big things with
fish and vegetation,
right.
all sorts of things that we try and limit the spread of invasive, invasive or problematic factors.
Yep. I know going into Australia, they sure take a look at your shoes or hiking boots or tents for any kind of soil or seeds or anything that could be deleterious, if in the wrong environment. So, yeah, just one more thing to think about, I guess. If you're out herping in the mud, clean off those shoes before you go to your next area and make sure you're not introducing that potentially Ophidiomyces containing soil to new areas.
Yeah, as you say, probably best practice anyway,
right,
with the correlation that already has with those other potential risk, being a vector for other potential risks. That probably is just best practice as a person in the outdoors.
Yeah. And I guess, I don't know that you need to go all the way of having a water bath, a tub that you dip your shoes in bleach in the tub. But, if you can do that and it's feasible, then why not? It's kind of an ounce of prevention. So I guess you can do your part as much as you want to, but yeah. So I don't know. I think those kind of sums up my thoughts on the topic. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that was mentioned that was applicable to the discussion today. I think I mentioned there were a couple different fungal diseases that snakes can get, and they're not very closely related, if I remember right. Like they were pretty divergent, but could both cause, fungal disease in snakes. There's a turtle fungal disease now as well, and it causes like pitting and lesions on the shells of aquatic turtles. So that's not great, and So, there's all sorts of nasty
Was that
things.
presented as being novel, potentially novel, or is that an awareness?
It seemed like it was a new thing, at least in North America. And she didn't say much about it, just showed like, here's another fungal disease of herps, and this turtle fungal disease. So maybe like ophidiomyces or snake fungal disease, it's becoming more commonplace or prevalent in different populations. So another thing to keep an eye on. And
sure.
Yeah, I mean, water, like chytrid in the water is like, I mean, it's just almost impossible to remove from the environment. And I think that's the common thread with these things is once they get in the environment, they're very difficult. I mean, you can't just clean up the forest, once these fungal diseases are present. So that's, again, maybe a reason to be more cognizant of if you're tracking mud from one location to another, or, walking through a pond and you're, not cleaning your boots in between ponds, that could be a risk, of transmission. And again, that's how chytrid was spread by scientists who were studying the effects of chytrid, before they really knew how it was transmitted. They were walking in the same boots, between different water bodies and unknowingly transmitting chytrid from one place to another. Sad, but if you don't have that information, you don't know that you're causing harm. You're trying to help the problem, but at the same time, you're making it worse. It's that's kind of a no-win battle. Like, I don't know. It's hard to fault anybody for that when the knowledge wasn't there. But that's the importance of research, people.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I certainly appreciate your insight and perspective, given your background on all this stuff. I learned so much just hearing you talk about it. So it's, to me, hopefully folks find it interesting just from a perspective of someone who, is an expert in things in this vein at a minimum to kind of hear sort of a learned perspective around these things. So I think there's utility to it.
Yeah, there were some questions about treatments, other options. You can do an antifungal, but there's also topical. One of our veterinarians at the university, who's also a raptor guy, he's a falconer, a really cool guy. He's from Netherlands, and Dr. Van Wettery, but he asked about F10. He said in the bird world, they nebulize F10 and use that as a treatment for different fungal diseases of birds. And so I wondered if that had been tried yet. And I know that I've seen F10 used in the same way in herps and as a nebulized treatment, or also just topical. So, bathe your in a diluted solution of F10. And he said it's pretty safe as far as it goes for birds. And I believe it's the same for reptiles, but I guess don't run out and buy gallons of F10 and start bathing your sick animals in it. I don't know that that's a good solution either. But,
right. That sort of takes us back 5 or 10 years when people were kind of doing that. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it is an effective, quaternary disinfectant. So, there may be some reasonable.
Sure.
I mean, once it gets in the lungs, like if you've got a virus in the lungs, your F10 is probably of limited use. Maybe if they're inhaling it or, a nebulized form or something, that might have an impact, but, it could also have a very negative impact, depending on, dose and things like that. So not something to be done willy-nilly for sure, but I guess if there's no other solution, it doesn't hurt to try some things like that. So I don't know. And F10, I mean, you can get it off of Amazon these days, and it's ready to spray formulation and all that good stuff. I think there was some differences in like nebulized F10. You don't just use the common spray or whatever. Yeah, there's little differences to the solutions or something like that. So Yeah.
There you go. Highlighting details.
Right.
Who has time for that?
Right. Exactly. I mean, that's, I think it was, I had those rough scale pythons that, had mites, and I didn't realize, I didn't expect the rarest python in the world to have mites on it. And then, had full blown mite infestation. And this was 20 years ago or 15 years ago or something. But I was, treating, the animals with, the frontline spray.
Oh, okay.
And it was too much, I was desperate. Like, I got to save these snakes. These aren't even my snakes. I didn't even buy these things, it was for a customer in Europe. And then, so I, sprayed them with the Frontline, and then I went to check on them, and they were both non-responsive. I'm like, oh crap, so I rinsed them off and resuscitated them, and they regained their faculties and were okay. They went on to reproduce and everything, but yeah, that scared the crap out of me, because this was like a 7K pair of snakes back in the day. So not the best situation to have there. Kind of scary. So yeah, know what you're doing. Don't be like me. Overreact and do the wrong thing. But
yeah, there's certainly something to that, just generally, right? I know often the where things really go sideways is overreacting, but
right. And I think that was kind of, giving Nick a little bit of the benefit of the doubt. That's kind of his, suggestion is don't overreact. Sure. I mean, obviously he's maybe a little underestimating the damage that serpentovirus can do. But at the same time, some of these are maybe innocuous forms, or some of our animals might just be carriers. They may not be severely impacted by the virus. So to euthanize an animal just because it has a virus is not, the best idea either,
Good to hear you say that. Again, with the perspective. Yeah.
Right. Well, I mean, just put it in human perspective. If you go in with COVID, they're not going to euthanize you at the hospital because you test positive for COVID. At least maybe that's what some people thought was happening at the hospitals. We need those deaths so we can get our funding. Let's put this person down because they have COVID. I'm sure some conspiracy theorists had that in mind. But yeah, I don't know. It's all kind of take things with a grain of salt and do things, in a reasonable manner rather than some over exaggerated way. Probably good practice for life in general. Don't get worked up over things too quickly, and think things through and get more information and study things. It's best approach, I think.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah. Well, have we covered the topic? Any other thoughts in that regard?
I think so. The only other things that jump to mind is that Bob Zappalordi, who we had on the show coming up on a year ago, has written some research papers on SFD along with Joanna Berger. So if you go to Bob's website, Herpological Associates, there are some interesting studies available to read there. So I would recommend that as a resource. Yeah. And additionally, and I don't know how this fits in, but it certainly has been interesting to me. So Adam from The Expert and the Idiot has talked quite a bit about wanting to keep diamond pythons outside. And he just had an episode with Dr. Zach Loafman where he was asking him essentially the risk associated with pentastomes with potentially doing that.
Right.
So he and Zach had a really good conversation around that I would encourage folks to listen to. The whole episode is really good. And
the pentasome problem, that's from the introduced Burmese pythons that have kind of brought that with them.
That's my understanding.
And then it's spread to the native flora or fauna, native snakes. And so the potential for a diamond python being housed outside to be exposed to a Burmese python traveling through the yard or another snake.
The environment, right, is the thing. So now I think I understand it to have had a profound impact on black racers, pygmy rattlesnakes, these sorts of things.
Yeah, that's
but
right.
my recollection from the conversation that Adam was having with Zach was that it's the sort of vector species. So it's actually, essentially Zach's suggestion was, as long as you can keep, I think he was principally talking about frogs as being a potential vector for this. So if you could keep the frogs out of the cage, I think there was also frogs, and I think he mentioned anoles as well, but the thought process was, at least if these were mature or, juvenile to mature diamond pythons, that they probably wouldn't be a tremendous risk that they would eat a green anole. But if we were talking about, obviously babies, that would be a potential risk. I think they kind of talked through that. So.
Right. And he's probably not housing babies outside. That's
right.
Not
certainly
likely.
Not now, but
right.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a good thing to think about. It's one of those things you may not consider. And then, that's good to consider. So similar to,
right.
I imagine it would be a risk housing things outside for serpenta or not phthiomyces, SFD infection. So, and I mean, there's all sorts of things that can happen. You think, I'll just keep them outside. That'll be no problems, and they'll do. But I mean, their behavior is different. There's risk of fire ants or other, diseases or other things in the environment. Predators. I remember Alan Rapace saying he bought a bunch of shinosaurs and raccoons broke in and just chewed off the heads of all of them. That would have
just
been
out of spite.
Yeah, that would have been horrible. So there's things to consider. But also keeping them indoors, you have risks and fires and all sorts of terrible things can happen. So just keeping things in mind or planning for those kind of things is important. Understanding what you're up against when you're designing an outdoor cage or something. I mean, people do it to great effect and great success, like Ron St. Pierre. He's a great example of making that work. But he also talks about the effort he goes to make it work, and all his cage redesigns and all the challenges that he faces, or tree, blocking the sun at the wrong time of year, that you don't want it to block the sun, and all those kind of things factor in and make life interesting.
Even soil and draining, right? Like all of those things is the
but also potential benefit. I still geek out about that cockroach in the leaves, where the blue-tongued skinks were getting fat and happy on the wild cockroaches in the leaves. I thought that was hilarious. So.
Or it was in the leaves, but under like cypress mulch bags, right? That he was using as an insulator.
Something like that.
Cages.
Yeah, pretty crazy. Well, I guess life is complicated sometimes. But I really think it's important to learn and to understand, what you're up against. It can be overwhelming or scary or things like that. So, and some people are hypochondriacs. They learn about some disease and then all of a sudden they feel like they have the symptoms of that disease. And, I think maybe we have that to some extent with our herps, like, I learned about this. Does my snake have this? And we go to drastic measures or spend a lot of money to diagnose stuff. But my friend is a doctor, and he was doing a service thing in South America, and he was ordering all these tests for kidney issues because everybody, was complaining about their kidneys, and he learned that it's just a cultural thing in that country. If something's wrong with you, you complain about your kidneys, even though the kidneys had nothing to do with it. He was wasting all this time and money and resources to test people's kidneys, but that was just what they said. Oh, my kidneys are hurting, or my kidneys are having issues. And so he had to learn that people just say that practice. There. Yeah. It's not a real, they don't really have kidney issues. They just say that when they have a malady, so it's kind of an interesting thing. And as we learn and grow, and, we can become more, capable of facing these issues or dealing with them. And I mean, sometimes you can't foresee something that's going to happen, and that can be pretty devastating. And I know a lot of people who are not in the hobby anymore or not breeding reptiles anymore because of tragedies that have struck. And So I don't know. It's hard to prevent everything, but do your best to shore yourself up where you can. Yeah. All right. Well, anything cool in herpetoculture these days that you've come across?
Well, I think those are the things that jump to mind. A lot of podcasts that I've been listening to. Expert Need It. I don't know. Maybe someday my episode will come out, but not yet.
Still in the bank.
Still haven't come around on the guitar. So we'll see. But I love what Adam's doing. I love the Reptile Rejects.
Right.
What Michael and Dom are doing. It's really cool.
You and Eric did a great job on his podcast and their podcast. Yeah. Fun to see more people out there doing the podcasts and hopefully having a long lifespan in that regard. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. How about you?
I don't know. I've just been geeking out on biogeographical barriers again. So learning more about those and some of the new ones that I didn't know about and how they play a role in maybe speciation. I don't know. I've been revisiting the Antaresia paper and thinking about those kind of things. So the new layout of, kind of conceiving what that might entail, not lumping them all together, but actually looking at the separations that they did identify and how those could, what you could call those things, so that's kind of what I've been involved in lately or thinking about lately. So I've listened to, who did I listen to? I haven't really been listening to Reptile podcasts too much lately, but I need to get more into that, I guess. Yeah.
The other thing that jumps to mind, actually based on you bringing that up, it prompted the thought of carpets and waterway associations. Is Chris Jolly has been posting more on iNaturalist lately, and he seems to be presently in the NT in the NT variably, but I had just seen today that right outside the Croc Hotel, seemingly on the boardwalk, there must be a it looks like on the map that there's a waterway that's directly to the north of that, basically coming in through town. And sure enough, there was like a 3 or 4 foot Darwin carpet.
Oh, really? Yeah.
They posted up that was just on the sidewalk, but it was in immediate association with water. So trees and water. So
yeah. Oh, that's cool. There's been quite a few people finding Darwin carpets. I think Ryan found a couple juveniles or something up there, and Paul Duran, didn't he find a Darwin as well? And pretty cool. I still geeking out about that Matt Somerville Darwin that he has in his captive collection. That thing just glows orange. It's insane. There's some nice looking snakes out there. But,
absolutely. And so hopefully at some point we'll have to try and make it work to hear about Paul's adventure. I'm excited for that. And I talked to Ryan a little bit after he had come back from his trip, and I guess he's already signed up to do a variety of podcasts to talk about that trip. So we'll get to hear about that. So that'll be good. Yeah. So,
he's kind of
things in the future.
Heavily involved in MJ's ventures and podcasts. So imagine he'll get scooped up there and a few different ones, but it'll be good to hear about his trip and he found some good stuff. Right. So, well, good times. And thanks for being willing to discuss this fun, sad topic. Never fun talking about diseases necessarily, but it's important and good to learn about these things and have some knowledge, I guess, about them. So hopefully that goal was met and we know a little bit more about them and we can behave accordingly in our herping and collecting ventures in the future. But appreciate you listening and thanks for supporting the show, and thanks to Eric and Owen for giving us a place to record and put out our stuff, and we'll catch you again next time for Reptile Fight Club.